Hello, 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 hello. Hello, hello, hello.
At Rocket Health, we move out. We move out to people, we move out to their homes, their offices.
FastAPI came in at a time where we felt that we needed to offer.
Hello. Okay, we are live. Okay, so I hope you're doing well, guys. Welcome to this live stream. Can you guys please leave me a one in the chat if you can hear me? That would be very helpful. Can you please leave me a one in the chat? It will help me understand if you guys get me clearly so that we start this live. Okay, hi Michael, welcome to the live stream. So the purpose of this live stream is to discuss WebSockets with Python. Okay, so you guys can hear me. All right, that's good. So hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're taking good care of yourselves. Thank you for the support on the FastAPI Beyond CRUD series. So the FastAPI Beyond CRUD series was received well, and I honestly have a list of topics I did not include on that. One of those topics is WebSockets, and we're going to be talking about WebSockets in this video. I've just decided to go live and make this video without scripting anything. So we shall be discussing while also trying to implement a very simple application, very simple one. We shall not complicate a lot of things. So I hope you are doing well and you are having a great evening or a great day from wherever you are. I am here in Uganda and it's 20:55, which is almost like 9 o'clock or 21 hours. So we need to be discussing WebSockets, and we're first of all going to ask ourselves the question, what are WebSockets? So let's start with a simple example. I have a simple diagram drawer or draw.io. So this is where I'm going to be building or basically demonstrating what WebSockets are from. So in the context of the normal applications that we build, the ones we build with, let's say, HTTP, where you have like a REST API and then a front-end client, you're always going to have a server. I think I should even use the diagram. So let me try to pull those out. So I may start with a client, like the one we have right here. So this is going to stand for our client. And then we shall also have a server. So I'm going to also draw a simple server right here. So these are just demonstrations. I know you guys can at least understand what I'm talking about. So in the context of normal web applications that communicate over HTTP, you're always going to have a web server and a web client. So this client can be anything like a mobile device, or let's say a client is web browser, or any other client application that may want to use your specific app or whatever resides on the web server. So most of the times you will be required to get a request coming from a client to the server, and then after that the server will process that request and then return a response. So you're always having one connection where a front end is to make a connection to the server and the server is to return a response. So WebSockets are basically a protocol or a set of rules that define the communication of a web server and a web client without there being that connecting and disconnecting. So all you'll be having is a client and a server connecting, and then they will form a long-lived connection. So this long-lived connection will allow for information to be sent between the client and the server for as long as that connection is established. So we're going to be looking at how we can develop a simple WebSocket server with FastAPI, and then we shall be using JavaScript on the front end to make requests and also get data from the server in real time. So WebSockets are a protocol, it's like HTTP. They allow for the communication between a server and the client, just like I'm demonstrating here. But for them, we have one connection that will be established, and on that connection, messages will be sent from both the client and the server. So in both directions, we can have information flowing. So that means that a server can send information to a client, and the client can also send information to the server without breaking a connection. An alternative to that over HTTP can be polling. So polling requires that the client checks the status, or basically pings the server to check if there is an update or any new data that may be coming from the server. And WebSockets are different from that, because all the client needs to do is to establish an initial connection to the web server, and then with that connection in place, the client will be able to get any data coming from the server, and also the server will be in position to get any data that is coming from the client. So I hope you guys have understood that simple description. I'm not the best at drawing these diagrams. So what I'm going to start with is a simple setup of FastAPI. And with that setup, we are going to write a web server. So I'm going to start by creating a virtual environment inside this blank folder that I've opened up in VS Code. I'm on Ubuntu, so I can pretty much use the same virtual environment module that comes with Python. So I'm going to say Python 3-m length and then env. You can also use other tools like pipenv, or of late I've been checking out UV, which is a pretty fast way to build or basically set up your virtual environment, install your dependencies, and so on. So I'll activate this virtual environment with source env bin and activate. And once I've activated the virtual environment, I'll then install FastAPI. So I'll do pip install FastAPI. So the thing is, FastAPI comes with other dependencies, like those that help us to render Ginger to templates and upload files and all that stuff. And for me to be able to do that, what I'm going to do is to use the standard installation. So I'll say pip install FastAPI, and then I'll specify that I'm going to do the standard installation to include all those other packages. So this will go ahead and pull all those, add them to our virtual environment, and then we shall proceed with making this be in requirements for txt, and also build our server. So once our requirements have been installed, I'm going to go ahead and freeze this to a requirements.txt file. So I'll do that with pip freeze and then requirements.txt. So that's going to be created. I've not actually frozen them to the requirements.txt. It's just froze to the output. So I have to add this greater than sign so that we have our requirements.txt file. And these are the requirements for our project. Now this is a standard installation, and that's why it has quite a lot of stuff to it. One thing we can observe is we have the FastAPI CLI. So we can go ahead and say FastAPI, and that will go ahead and tell us that we are missing the command to run. So what we're going to do is to, first of all, write a simple class, and this class is going to be one to help us keep our connection and also manage some methods that are going to be run on our WebSocket connection. So to do that, I'll create a file right here, and I'm going to simply call this manager.py. And manager.py is going to be a simple file that's going to be basically containing methods, and these methods are going to influence how our WebSockets are going to happen. So I'm going to start by creating that class. So I'll just simply call this our manager, or to make things more interesting, I can call this the WebSocket manager. So this class will not be inheriting from anything, and therefore we are just going to keep it plain, just like we see it here. Then we are going to define a dunder init or an initializer method. So this is going to contain some information about the manager objects that we shall be creating from this class. Now in here, since I have the self.clients, I'm going to actually make this a set. So this can be a set or it can be a list, but I prefer to keep it as a list. So that's what I'm going to do. I keep it as an empty list. Now this is going to be a list where I'm going to be adding all the WebSocket connections that we shall be making on our simple web server or our simple WebSocket server. So I can even make things more interesting by calling this the connected clients, and this will be a simple list of clients. Now when dealing with WebSockets, we have to keep in mind that we are going to be having different methods or different events that are going to be happening. So WebSockets on the back end will be implemented via the WebSocket classes, and those WebSocket classes are provided by FastAPI that is also wrapping on what Starlet provides. So for us to access the WebSocket support, we have to then go ahead and understand how Starlet provides for us those WebSockets. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to go and import the FastAPI WebSocket class, and then that FastAPI WebSocket class is going to be linking us to Starlet, which is the framework that is what FastAPI is built on top of. So what I'm going to say is from FastAPI.WebSockets, we are going to go ahead and import a simple class called the WebSocket class. Now if we are to go back and look at what this class is, we're going to notice that it's going to come from Starlet.WebSockets. And if we are to check out what that class is, we are going to see that it's an HTTP connection, but it's going to have quite a lot of methods and quite a lot of things or attributes that we may want to call on it. So the first thing we can notice is this is going to have the receive methods, the send method. So these are the ones that are going to be responsible in helping us send messages and receive messages from the clients that will be connected to our web server. So the receive method is the one that's going to receive the WebSocket messages, and then the send is what is going to allow us to send messages. And then we can continue to say the accept method. So this is the one that's going to be called every time the WebSocket connection will be made onto our server from any client that will connect. Now there are very many things like receive text, which is going to allow us to receive text, receive bytes, which is going to allow us to receive bytes, and this is going to allow us to receive JSON, and we're going to look at how we are going to call all these. So the first thing we're going to do is to first of all write two methods that are going to be allowing us to handle what shall happen when the server receives a client and when the server basically disconnects, or when a client disconnects from our server. So what we're going to do is to go ahead and start by defining a coroutine or a method. So this is going to be the connect method. It's going to take in self, and it will also take in a client object, or what we may refer to as a WebSocket object. So the WebSocket object is going to be the one that's going to be for the connection, and it's going to contain all the information about the client that will have connected to our WebSocket server. So in this case, what we can do is to take in our WebSocket object, and this is going to be of type WebSocket. And once we receive this, we can then go ahead and basically append to the list of connected clients. But before we do that, we have to first of all go ahead and accept the connection, or for us to actually do that, we can do it in our server code. So let's go ahead and just append the newly connected client, which is going to be our WebSocket object, to our web server. So to do that, what we can do is to just come right here and say that we are going to go ahead and say self.connected clients. Now I'm using AI to do the code recommendations, but I'm not going to type those. I'm going to ignore those. So in here, we can also go ahead and append the WebSocket. And we can also do interesting things such as accessing the client information. So for our case, what we can do is to go ahead and say print, and we can basically say client, and then we can get the IP of the client that connected to our WebSocket server. So for that case, we can say something like WebSocket.client.host, and then we can also get the port of that WebSocket client, which is going to be via WebSocket.client.port. So if we have that, then this is going to first of all go in our output, print the client's IP address, and then it will go ahead and add this to the list of WebSockets. Now, to make this more interesting, we can also go ahead and do something like print. And for our case, we can go ahead and print our clients. So we can say connected clients, and this is going to print our self.connected clients. So once that is done, we have pretty much handled what we need when we establish that WebSocket connection. Now, the next thing is going to be to handle what is going to happen when we are disconnected from, or when a client disconnects from our WebSocket server. So to do that, I'm going to come right here and say async def, and here we shall just implement the disconnect method. So this is going to take in self, and then we are simply going to go ahead and disconnect from disconnect. So this is basically what we need to handle when we disconnect from our web server. So the clients are going to be web browsers for this simple demo, and those web browsers will connect and disconnect, and when they connect, we shall trigger that disconnect event or close the WebSocket connection. So once that is done, we shall simply go ahead and remove the WebSocket, print the WebSocket client that disconnected, and also the connected clients, or the currently connected clients. So for this to make sense, we shall have to actually set up the clients. So what I'm going to do is to then go ahead and also define a method that's going to be responsible for helping us to send messages to the client, or send messages from the client to the server, or from the server to the client in this case, because what we're writing here is server-side code. So I'm going to say async and then def, and for our case, we shall basically send a message. So for our case, our message is going to be sent, but we shall have self and then the WebSocket object. Once we've set up the WebSocket object and the function to send that message, we're now going to go ahead and simply get the message and then send it. So for our case, what I'm going to do is to first of all create the message, and our message is going to be a dictionary. But this message is going to contain both the client IP as well as the message that we're actually sending. So one thing that I forgot is, since we want to send a message, we shall need the WebSocket as well as the message. So I'm going to go ahead and provide it here. And this message is going to be a string message. So once I'm done with that, I'll come and say that our client is going to be the client, which I can simply get by doing exactly what we did here. So I'm just going to keep track of the IP address. And then I'll also provide the message. So our message is going to be the message that we get via the method that we're implementing. And once we've got the message, then we're going to call a method on our WebSocket connection, which is going to be one to send this message to the client that actually sent it. So to do that, we can just say await, and then we can call our WebSocket object, and then here we can call one of different methods. So if you want to send a message, you can call send. If you want to send in terms of bytes, we can use send bytes, and then we can also send JSON. We can also send text, just like you see right here. So what I'm going to do is to send the message as JSON, and this will be just enough for us to send the message. So we've implemented three methods: one to connect, one that is going to be called when we connect, another one that's going to be called when we go ahead and send a message, and another one that's going to be called when we disconnect. So once that is done, I think we can now implement our simple WebSocket server. So before I do that, I think I can now go ahead and read some comments. So right here in the chat, I'm seeing I dropped you a small couple of weeks back, but you have not checked or replied. Very sorry, sometimes I get busy, but I will look into the email and respond. And then I've got this message that I cannot read. I think it's in Russian, but yeah, I guess you have to be clear, because I do not understand Russian. So I think I should continue. So once this is done, then we can now go ahead and implement our simple WebSocket server. So I'm going to come right here, and what I have to do is to create a file, and this is going to be I'm going to simply call it app.py. And within our app.py, I'm now going to go ahead and set up FastAPI to run a simple web server. This web server is going to be rendering the template that we're going to be using to send or receive messages from the server, and it's also going to be one to help us get messages, or actually it's going to help us both receive messages on the client side and also send messages from the client side. So to do that, we can simply come by, first of all, creating a FastAPI instance. I'm going to come and say from FastAPI, we are going to go ahead and import the FastAPI instance. Now, similar to what we do when developing REST APIs, we are going to create a FastAPI instance, and then we shall use it to create a decorator to help us create the WebSocket endpoint. So I'll go ahead and create the app instance, and after creating it, I'm now going to go ahead and first of all create the template, the request that's going to help us get the template or the route. So that's going to be our route, and then we shall define the handler function for that. So I'll just simply come right here and say route, and then we can return hello world. But what I want to do is to return a template in this response. So let me first of all run the server. So I'll pull up our terminal right here, and to run our FastAPI server, we can now say FastAPI, and for our case, we can do dev because we're in development, but in production, you'll prefer to run something like FastAPI run. Then we shall have to point to the file or the module that contains our app instance, which is app.py. But then FastAPI also automatically recognizes files like app.py, and when they have the app instance, it will automatically go ahead and run. So if we run FastAPI dev and our app instance is found within our app.py, it will automatically go ahead and view it and then run our server based off that app instance. So for now, what you can do is to go ahead and test our client. So what I'm going to do is to control and click here, and now we shall see that we can get our response, which is our hello world that we have right here. So we've successfully set up our web server. Now that we've set up this web server, let's go ahead and render a template using Jinja. So since we did the standard FastAPI installation, we can go ahead and also set up templates or HTML that is dynamic that we can render via our server. So to do that, we can come right here and first of all create what is called a template object. So that template object is going to be one to help us to render or return a response that contains an HTML template or a Jinja 2 template. So I'll come right here and say from FastAPI dot templates or templating, we shall import the Jinja 2 template class, or I don't know if it's a class, can become curious and find out. So this is basically how I can go ahead and find out what a certain object is. So for this case, it's a class. And once I've been able to access that, then we need to create the template object. So the template object is going to be created by simply creating a variable called templates. This variable is going to be from our class, it's going to be an object of our class, which is the Ginger to templates class. And what it will take in is going to be the directory. So the directory is going to be one where we are going to keep our HTML templates. So for my case, I'm going to call the directory templates. And then I need to go ahead and create that directory that contains the templates. So I'll go here, I'll create a new file, I'll call it templates, and then I'm going to go ahead and provide the simple HTML template that we want to use. So for our case, we shall just go ahead and give this a name of index.html, and this will be just enough for our template to be created. Then I'll create some dummy HTML in here. I'll provide this as our FastAPI WebSocket demo. And then I can create a simple H1 here. So this simple H1 is going to be FastAPI WebSocket demo. Okay, so once I have this HTML template, I can now go ahead and render this using our web server. So to do that, I'll go in here and instead of returning this JSON response, what I can do is to go ahead and return a template response. So to do that, I can come right in here and say return templates. And for our case, I'll say dot template response, which is the class to return a template response. So this is going to require us to take in a request object. So we need to import that. So I'll say from FastAPI dot requests, we shall import our request class, and then we shall have to inject it within the handler for that specific path. So for our case, we can come right here and say request, and that is going to take in the request class, or it's going to be of type request. So when returning a template request or a template response, the first thing is going to be the request object, and then we shall provide the template name. So for our case, we've called that index.html. And once we've called index.html, we're now going to go ahead and provide the context. So since we do not have any variables that we are returning within this response, we're going to keep the context dictionary empty, and that will be just enough for us to go ahead and use our request. So if I save, I'm now going to go back to our browser right here, and when I refresh, we shall now notice that we have our FastAPI WebSocket demo. So the logic is that we are having our FastAPI application being the backend, or being the WebSocket server, as well as the web server for this specific app. And then we're also going to have our HTML template where we're going to run the JavaScript that will be handling the WebSocket client code. So we've set up our server. We've also written the manager, which is going to be one to help us be able to handle what is going to be done by the server on the back end. Now we're going to also go ahead or proceed by setting up our client so that we can at least see what happens in a WebSocket application. So in our client, we are going to go ahead and first initialize our JavaScript so that we can at least make one client connect to our WebSocket server. So to do that, I'll come and say script, and this is going to be one to help us run some sort of JavaScript. So I'm actually getting all the things being written here. So I can choose to autocomplete, and then this code will autocomplete, but I want to go step by step. So the first thing to handle a WebSocket connection is to create a WebSocket object. So that WebSocket object is going to be created by JavaScript, and to do that, we shall just have to define a WebSocket. We can create a connection by saying const ws. So this is basically creating a variable called ws, and this is going to be a new WebSocket object. So the things it's going to take in is the URL or the string to the path that contains the WebSocket server. So for us to connect to our web server, we have to define the URL or the path that's going to lead us to our WebSocket endpoint on the web server that we want to connect to. For our case, we have defined this, or we haven't actually yet defined it. So I'll come and define this on our web server. I'll just come and say at app.get, and for that case, we shall come and say app.get, which is not going to be actually app.get, but since we want to create a WebSocket connection or a WebSocket endpoint on our WebSocket server, it's going to be app.websocket. So for our case, you can say app.websocket, and then this is going to take in the path on which we are going to expose our WebSocket server. So our path in this case is going to be called ws. Then we have to define a handler for that WebSocket connection. So we can define it as async def WebSocket endpoint, and then this will take in the WebSocket connection object or the client. So each WebSocket object is going to represent a client connecting to our WebSocket server. So to make this work, I have to import the WebSocket class, similar to what we did here in our manager. Now I can go ahead and import that from FastAPI.WebSocket. And once we've done that, we can now go ahead and simply define everything that will happen in case we are to handle a connection to our WebSocket client. So for now, we have our manager class that we created in here. This manager class has methods we are going to call on events that we shall call on our WebSocket clients or WebSocket objects or WebSocket connections, whatever you want to call them. So I'll just come right here and say app. So first accept the connection, and that is going to be done via the accept method. And once we accept the connection, we're now going to go ahead and await all data that will be sent by the client, as well as sending that data back to the client. So that's what we're going to do. When information comes from our JavaScript, we are now going to go ahead and bounce that data back to the client, and then we shall have that two-way flow of data in between the client and the server. But before we do that, let's first of all go ahead and try to use our manager instead of the WebSocket directly. So I'm going to remove this accept, and what I'll do is to go ahead and import our manager. Now that's located within our manager module. So we shall import our manager or our WebSocket manager, and then we shall come right here and say that we are going to go ahead and have that as our WebSocket manager. Now keep in mind that this has self.connected clients, which is an empty list of clients, and we're going to be updating it by simply calling the connect method. So the connect method is going to be called just inside our WebSocket handler here. We shall just come and say await manager.connect, and that will take in a WebSocket object. So we are going to call that inside there, just like that. And we expect that if this is called, then we are going to print the client's IP address, as well as adding that client to the list of our connected clients. And these are also going to be WebSocket objects. Now the reason as to why I'm keeping these in a list is going to be understood later in this video. So what I'm going to do is to come right here and save, hoping that our server is going to restart. This time when we refresh, since we've added some JavaScript in there, we haven't actually saved the code. that's supposed to go ahead and run the WebSocket. So if I save, I have to refresh the client. And this means that we are going to sort of set up a WebSocket connection, but this is just a plain WebSocket object. So one thing to understand is a WebSocket object is to be created on both the client and the server. So basically, we are handling the connection on the server side, and we are going to go ahead and call the connect method that's going to print the client's IP. So what we've done is to create this WebSocket object, and then we need to listen for some events just like we did on the server side. So to listen to those events, we can call them by simply calling on. So we have different events like opening the connection and messaging, and then an error happening, and then we also have the event for closing the connection, or which will be called, or the event that is going to be called each time the connection is going to be closed. Now this means that in situations such as the browser closing, the server is going to trigger that event and basically handle something on the server side. So what you can do is to go ahead and write handlers for all these events. So we're going to start with on open, and then we can simply console log connected to WebSocket server or any other thing, and then we can handle the one for on message, which is going to be handling what will happen when we have a message coming from the backend or coming from the WebSocket server. Now for our case, we have to go ahead and define a handler. So that handler is going to be a JavaScript function that will take in as an event, and then that event is what will help us to access the data. So we can go ahead and pass that data since we are sending it as JSON, and then we can log it. So for now we can only log it, but we're also going to see how we can handle it on the client side. Once that is done, I can now go ahead and also do the on error. So on error, we shall get the error and console log it, and then we can also do the on close. So on closing the connection, of course, we are going to go ahead and console log on the WebSocket client. So these are basically the 4 events that we're going to be handling. So when we open the connection, that is what is going to happen every time the accept method is going to be called, or when we go ahead and actually connect. So one thing we can do is to go ahead and simply, so I think I'm actually having a mistake in here, because if we are connecting, that means we are going to go ahead and call the WebSocket.accept. So I guess I have to call it here by saying await WebSocket.accept, and then, but then I think it's better for us to call that inside the manager. So I'll just come right here and then print, or actually execute that code for handling our accepting. So when the client connects, we are going to call accept, and then we shall print the IP address of that client, and then we shall append that to the list of connected clients, and then we shall resume with handling our other stuff. So I'll save. Our server will reload. Same thing is going to happen here when you call the await manager.connect. So even if I save this, now I need to just go ahead and save what is going to happen on the client. So one thing to notice is the different events. When you open the connection, we are going to log this. When the connection is closed, that means when the browser is closed, or let's say the web server stops for some reason, the connection is going to be closed, and therefore we shall run some code in that specific event. So to continue, let's go ahead and actually just refresh our browser or our client to see what is going to happen. I'm going to open up the DevTools on my browser so that we can actually see what is going to happen. So we have an error, uncode type error, failed to construct WebSocket, 1 argument required but only 0 present. So I guess I forgot to go ahead and specify the URL on which our WebSocket server is. So anytime we are connecting to a WebSocket server of some sort, we are going to be using the WS protocol. And basically, every server that's going to be using this protocol is going to be using either WS or WSS. So in a normal HTTP setting, we are usually using things like HTTP or HTTPS, but for WebSockets, you're always going to say WS or WSS. Now for our local server, we are simply going to go ahead and specify that we are going to be using WS. So that is basically WebSockets, and then this is going to be for the WebSockets secure, and then just like HTTP and HTTPS are. So once that is done, we shall specify the host on which our WebSocket server is running, and that's going to be our local host 8000, and that will be on the /ws endpoint. So once that is done, we shall save, and for this case, in this case, our WebSocket connection is going to be open. Now I have a problem. My browser is going to be different from the my dev tools are not docked inside the browser. So we now see that we've established a connection in between our web server and our web client. Now for now, we do not have anything happening. What we are having is simply a connection. We are not sending any type of data, and the server is not listening for any data that is being sent by the client. So to handle that, what we can do is to go ahead and call one of these methods, or basically call some of the methods that we are dealing with right here. And to do that, I'm going to write an infinite while loop that's going to basically run forever. And we are going to do that by simply coming and saying while true. I'm actually doing spelling mistakes. So this is going to be while true. And while true, we shall await any message that's going to come from the client. So what you can do is to go ahead and say message is going to be equal to await. And in that case, we expect to get the message from the WebSocket object. So that is going to be WebSocket dot, in our case, we shall receive JSON, because that's what I'm going to be using to send messages from the client. And after receiving that JSON, we can now go ahead and do things like maybe printing the message that is being sent. A moment, let me come back. right. Okay, so just like I was, so I have gone out a little bit. So basically what we have done is to go ahead and await any JSON that is going to come from the client side. And then we can just simply print that message. But then what we can also do is to go ahead and send the messages. So I'm going to use await manager dot send. And for our case, this is going to take in the WebSocket connection as well as the message. So for our case, we actually said that this is going to be a message, but this has to be a dict. So I have to update that since I'm sending JSON. And that is going to be it. So what this is going to do is to await any message that's going to come from the client side and also send that message. Now for our case, we are actually not doing anything like sending a message from the server side. So what we want to do is to go ahead and send a message when the client connects, sort of like a welcome message when the handshake is done. So what I'll do is to head over back to the manager and I'll update the connect. We've actually implemented this, but we haven't yet run. So what I'm going to do is to try to test this out by refreshing. So if everything is okay, we can now see that our connected clients list is having some WebSocket objects. Now the reason that's why I'm keeping this, we can even see that our local host is the host, and then the port of the client is this. The reason that's why I'm keeping this list of WebSocket objects is because I'm going to be using them to broadcast messages. So that's the simple technique I'm basically using. I want to go ahead and get messages and then broadcast a message to all those clients that are going to be connected. So once that is done, I'm now going to go ahead and just simply handle a message that's going to be sent to the client. So to understand this, I'm going to leave some comments. For example, here we are accepting the connection. This is connecting, or the client has connected. And then here we are going to add that to the list of connected clients. And then I'll go ahead and send sort of like a welcome request or a welcome message. So I'll just come right here and say self, or we cannot even use self. We can just say await client, which is our WebSocket. And then we shall send JSON. And for our case, the JSON is going to be the data or a simple message. So what I can do is to come right in here and simply create that as a dictionary, or I can even create a separate variable called the message. And that's going to be a dictionary. Now for my case, I can still say that we're going to have the client, and our client is going to be this client. So I guess I'll have to just create this as a simple F string. Or what I can do is to say client IP. So my client IP is going to be a string. Then I want to make this an F string. So I'll do something like client host and then client port. And that is going to be the client port. So we are having our client IP right here. Now I'm going to keep that in here. So I can say that the client is going to be the client IP, and then the message that will be sent at first is going to be something like message, and then we shall have welcome client IP or something like that. And then we'll go ahead and provide the client IP to just send that message to the client every time they connect. So once the message has been sent or created, then we shall just go ahead and send the message. So our server is going to reload. When our server reloads, I'll then head over back to our client, refresh. Now when I go back to my console, I'll see that received message undefined. So it seems like there is a certain problem that's happening, but then our server is not complaining. So the client is basically happening. So I've got a comment here. Just wanted to tell you thanks a lot for making FastAPI tutorial. It was nice and helpful. I cleared all my doubts. Thank you, Adi, for the kind comment. I am really glad that you enjoy my videos. Thanks for watching, and I hope to create more videos. So basically, what we have done is to send a message to the client, but it seems like the client is not getting the message because we are getting undefined. So what I have to do is to go inside the JavaScript client code and then see what data is being sent. So our message is going to be event.data because that's how we are getting the message from our event object. But then we are getting message.data and then .data. I think we're supposed to just go ahead and say message. So I'll try to refresh our client. And then I'll head over back to the console. So for now, we see that we get an object. So it seems like we're having some good luck. So now that we can get the object, so this event.data is coming as an object. So something is weird because I think because we are getting this as a string, I think because we're giving it as a string, that's why it's going ahead and making it as an object. I think that's why it's displaying it as object. So for this to work the way we actually want it to work, I guess I'll have to just put the quotes away. And when I go back to the client and refresh, we'll now refresh, and now we can see the message that is coming from the server. So this client is this, and then the server is sending welcome IP address. So now we've successfully been able to connect to the web server, send a welcome message, and now we're going to look at how we can implement the real-time bidirectional transfer of data. So guys, if you're watching, I kindly request you leave a like on this video. Thank you. So yeah, let's go on. So now that we've been successful in creating our WebSocket server and our WebSocket client, now is the time to actually handle the bidirectional transfer of data. Just like I said, this is a very simple example, and it may not mimic, or it may not even look like one of the big applications or the biggest applications you can build with WebSockets, but it's going to help us kind of understand how a WebSocket application may work. So we are now going to go ahead and handle what is going to be the sending of the data on the client side. So for now, our HTML is consisting of only an H1 element as well as a script tag. So I'm keeping my JavaScript here, but please, in a real world app, it's basically important for you to separate your concerns by going ahead and writing a separate JavaScript file where all your JavaScript code is going to reside. So what I'm going to do is to now go ahead and create a form that's going to submit data to our server. So to do that, I'll say form, and then this form is not going to have any action. So because I'm going to be handling everything it will do with JavaScript. So in here, we shall have a basic input. So we can actually have a label, and then this label is going to be for the message. Then we can have our message in here. So yes, I'll have to call this message, and then I'll create a paragraph where my input is going to be. So this input is going to be of type text, and then we can give it a name of message. Now everything here is going to be handled with JavaScript. And then we shall also create an input of type submit that's going to have, or a button of type submit that's going to have the send. Now, do not mind if you do not know a little bit of JavaScript. I'm going to be explaining everything that's going to be taking place. So what I'm going to do is to save, and then I'll head over back to the client. And in here, when I refresh, I now kind of have this simple message input. So let me actually make it a little bit smaller so that you guys can see. So what we want to do is to submit messages through this simple input, or this simple form right here. And those messages have to be bounced back by the server. So what is going to happen is the server is going to send the message to the client when it gets it. So to just make that concept of bidirectional data transfer work, we just have to have a client sending information to the server, and the server being in position to send back information to the client without having to establish a new connection in between those two parties. So I'll come and say something like getting the form and getting the data that's going to be sent via the form. So JavaScript is interesting, most especially front-end JavaScript. Now, I haven't yet done a lot of back-end JavaScript. I did it only once, but one thing I understand is there are lots of different APIs that allow you to do different things on the client side. And one of them is the WebSocket API, the one that we are using to listen to our WebSocket server. And then we can also have APIs to interact with forms and get data from those forms. And that's where the form data API is going to come in. So for us to access that, we have to go ahead and create a form data object. So what I'm going to do is to come right here and say const. Let me actually first of all select the form. So to select the form using JavaScript, I'll say const form, and that's going to be document. So that's basically the object for the entire document. And then inside there, we can get to access HTML elements by using either query selector, or we can use get element by ID. But for my case, I want to access that specific element by its tag name. So I'll just choose query selector. So I'll provide the form tag name, and once I've got that, I can now go ahead and just simply console log the form. And that will show that we have accessed the form. So if I go back to my client and refresh, I can now go within my console, and now you'll see that I have a form object being printed here with its children, which are the label and the input and the button to submit that form. So once I have that, then I can also use the form data API to get all the data that's going to be present within this form. Every time we submit this form with data, that data is going to be got via the form data API. So I can do that using const form data, and this is going to be new form data. So this is going to take in a form object. So I'll provide the form object. So once I get the form object, I can now go ahead and use that form object for whatever I want to do. And that's how we shall access the data that we're going to send to the client or to send to the server. So to do that, I'm going to come right here and say, I'm going to add an event listener to the form such that I'll be able to perform some actions when someone submits the form. So I have to listen to the event listener for the form being submitted, and then that is where we shall get the data, send it to the web server, and then get some data in response. So to do that, I'm just going to come and say form.add event listener, and for our case, this is going to be the submit event. So this will take in a callback function, which is going to handle the event of sending the data back to, or sending the data to the server. So once I have this, then I'll have to prevent the form from reloading our page every time we submit it. So to do that, I'll have to provide an event object, and that event object is going to be having a special method called event.prevent_default to prevent the default behavior of the form. So it's going to prevent it from reloading the page. So once that is done, when you go back to our client, we shall notice that when we refresh, we are going to send or submit the form without having to reload our page. And once that is done, now what I'm going to do is to move this form data object inside our event listener. And once that is done, then we can go ahead and construct a message. So the message is going to have our message. But now I see that the message is actually having another format, of which that's not what exactly I want. So what I'm going to do is so let me actually see how I'm handling the message that's coming from the client. I'm getting the message as a dictionary, and then once I get the message, so one thing that's actually confusing is my message is a dictionary. Oh, that's actually confusing. Let me try to see how I'm handling it on the web server. Receive JSON, that's the message. I get the message. After getting the message, I'm receiving the message as JSON. Okay. But then I think I can also send a message as JSON, which is also a string. So let me see how to handle that. So instead of saying message, I can just come and say that our message. So I guess I'll have to use const message is going to be equal to the data that's going to be coming from the form. So we can use this form data object to create or to get the message. So we can use that .get method, and then we can access the message via its name. So if we create an input, give it a name attribute, this is what we can access as the key to give us the data that was put into that input. So what I can do is to go ahead and use that by basically getting the data. So I can say form data.get, and then I point to the name attribute of that specific form input, which shall give me the message. So once I have the message, I can then use the WebSocket object to send that message. So to do that, I can just say, I'm getting some weird thing here, but I guess I have to deal with it. So if I save, I'll come and refresh. If I send, and if I send that, I'm going to have the message being received on the server side, just like you see. Now, one thing I can see is my connected clients are many. I don't know why. Am I having different connections? It seems like I only have this connection here. I don't know if this also counts as a connection. So let me try to restart the server so that I make things, so that I can make the what? The client list empty. So I refresh. We now have one connected client, which is good. So once we have this one connected client, I can actually play around by creating multiple connected clients. So I can create another tab. Now, one thing that is very interesting about web browsers is the fact that for every tab or window you open of a web browser, you're going to have a different port that's going to be used to connect to any server or any website that you will try to access. So for example, if I opened up localhost 8000 in this different browser, it's now going to go ahead and give us an IP address, or it's going to tell us that a new client has connected. That client's IP address is going to be listed as another IP address. Now I have a mistake here. It's just printing client. It's not printing the IP address of the client. Let me try to see where that issue is coming from. So here is printing client. So I needed to go ahead and provide the client IP. So after providing the client IP, I refresh. You now see the client IP is going to be listed here. If I go ahead and refresh in this one, a different client IP, which is this. So you see the difference in the ports. The host name is going to be the same, localhost, but the port number is going to be different for all the clients that are going to connect to the server. So what I'm going to do is to separate them, put them side by side, and then I'll do something more interesting than just sending from one client. So what do I want to do? What I want to do is to create sort of like a chart, because I created this for the purpose of helping us understand WebSockets by implementing a simple app. And the most common app is going to be the WebSocket app, but there are very many things that you can actually do. And I guess I have to also build other projects that are going to involve WebSockets, where you can do things like real-time games where you have multiple players. You can do things like real-time chats that display data coming from the server side, or anything that has real-time communication can be implemented via WebSockets. But for now, I just have this simple WebSockets chat sort of like application. Once I've done that, let me drink some water. Okay, so now each client can even send a message. So if I try to do something like, hey, and send, can also go ahead and say hi and send. All this, the server will actually tell us receive message, hey, receive message, hi. So one thing I need to do is to go ahead and handle those messages. So I can go ahead and update what is happening here. I'll get the message. Now this message is going to contain message.content. So in our manager, I come and say connect, and then I'm also going to have send message. So in our message, we have to provide message, and then for that will be message.content. And then we send that message with the client's IP address, as well as the client is the message. So let's try to do that. So what I'm going to do is to now handle what is going to happen, or the updating of the UI every time the server sends back the message. So first things first, we are going to create some HTML dynamically using JavaScript. So we're going to create a new object that is going to create a paragraph for a message that's going to come from the server. So I'm going to call that new message, and that new message is going to be a document. Now JavaScript is interesting, most especially on the front end, because you can get to manipulate HTML by just simply calling some methods. For example, create element is going to help us create an element, and we can point to the specific element we want to create. So for our case, that's going to be the element which we are going to call a paragraph. Now I want to add these paragraphs to a list of paragraphs. So what I can do is to maybe create sort of like a div that I can call messages, and this is where I'm going to append all those specific paragraphs with the messages. And once I'm done with that, I can now update the paragraph's content by saying p, or which is actually new message. Sorry for that. So I'll have new message, and in this case I'll specify that I want to update the inner text, and I'll give that a value. So I'm going to use this templating syntax from JavaScript to just simply provide a value that is dynamic. So this will contain the message that's going to come from the backend. I'm actually supposed to do that inside the ws.onMessage, because that's what is listening to the event of getting a new message from the server or from any other party. So that means I'll have to get rid of this. So submitting the form is just simply going to send the form. Another thing I've forgotten is we need to reset the form. So for me to do that, I can call form.reset such that our inputs do not have any data when they are going to send another message. So for that to happen, you'll notice something, that when I send a message, form is going to be blank. When I send a message, have to reload, send a message, clear the form, send a message, clear the form. All right, so now let's handle the updating of the UI. So I've done some things like providing a message as well as the content to fill that message. So our content in this case is going to have the data and the IP address of that specific data. So assuming we are having JavaScript objects that are being printed, we can now access the client's IP address as well as the message. So I'm going to clear this and try to send a message. So if I send a message here, in our console, we are going to get, so it seems like something is wrong. Either our clients are disconnected or something like that. So let me try to close this, try to inspect element. I'll send, go to the, I'm actually having different consoles for each of the clients that are connected. Let me try to see. I go back to the console. I have an error. WebSocket is already in closing state. So now another thing we can get to understand is when the web server disconnects or reloads for some reason, the connection is going to be broken. So that means the web server has to be up and running while the clients are also connected to it for this to work. So every time this fails, all we have to do is to go ahead and reload the clients. So I reload both clients. And now I'll try to send a message. I'll go back to the console. And that shows that I can get the messages. So this is the console for one specific client. And this is somehow confusing. I don't know how I can dock this back to each of the, I think I can go back to dock into separate window, dock to left, dock to bottom, and then dock to right. I think I can go with dock to right. Yeah. So this is now working. So I can also open up a console right here and go to the console. Okay. So both of our clients are connected. When I refresh, connected, welcome. And even if I connect here, connected, welcome. So both of our clients are connected. Now let's try to send some messages. If I send a message via this client, we're going to see WebSocket connection closed. So there's an error that is happening on the server side. And now we are saying dict object has no attribute content. So I guess I'm doing something wrong when receiving that data. To fix that, I have to view the message I'm actually working with. So I'll print message. Someone said that if you use print debugging, you are not a good developer. I'm not a good developer. I use print debugging. That was a joke. We are not good developers if we use print debugging. So okay, so I'll try to see what mistake I'm having. Wait. Oh, one stupid mistake I'm actually doing is not, so one thing that is important to understand is we need to also catch any errors that may happen, and Python, or let's say FastAPI, provides for us a class to handle the exception of our WebSocket connection, basically disconnecting. And the way we can do that is by simply coming right here. So I can do something like try, and I can try everything and then accept that specific error. So I can say accept, and then I'm going to accept disconnecting. So to do that, I'll still import that from the WebSockets module, and then I import that. Once I imported that, I'll just go ahead and handle that as await WebSocket.disconnect. And then what I can do is to call the manager.disconnect and then break. So I think the reason as to why we're having the other long list of clients was because we aren't removing any clients from the list of connected clients. So I'm going to go back right here and then try to reload all these clients. Connected, welcome, and then I refresh here. Connected, welcome, which is beautiful, which is awesome. So even here I have my list of connected clients, and those are 2 connected clients, which is amazing. Now things are making a little bit more sense. So we want to go ahead and update our UI on the client side using JavaScript. One thing we have done is to get the new message. Getting the new message is basically sending a message. We see something is still wrong, and we actually wanted to get that specific data. So the message is type text and then the content. So I think Python is getting the message as a dictionary and I'm trying to access the message as an object. So you see, I was saying something like message.content. So I needed to do something like message and then content, because that's how I'm getting the message. All right, so let me fix that and then try to send a message. So this is in closed set because the server has reloaded. Welcome. Welcome. Amazing. So let's try to send a message. Now I'm making this a little bit smaller. I think I have to pull this back so that you guys get to see. Send a message. Client has sent this message. And now I send this message. Client has been able to send this message. All right, so now our clients are sending the messages to the server and the server is sending the messages back to the client. Now that this is done, let's go ahead and update our UI. So we've created our paragraph object or our paragraph element, which is our new message. And we want to go ahead and append that to the list of messages, which is going to be our div of messages. We want to do that in an interesting way. We want to get the client's IP address, which is going to stand for their dummy name. And then we're also going to display the message from that specific client. To do that, I'm going to come right here and then I'll say something like the client IP. So that's going to be something like message dot. So for our case, this client is going to be client. So client, and then shall say client says. We can actually make this interesting by putting this in a sort of like I don't know if this will work, but let me try to make this bold by putting them in a bit tag. And then I'll say client says, and then I'll provide the message. So for our case, it's going to be message dot, and then I guess that will be message dot message, which is kind of repetitive. Or I can call this data and then have the message being called message. So let me go ahead and update this. So let me try to update it here first. And then can go ahead and say data.client and then also do data.message. All right. So once I've done this, then I need to select that specific list of messages. To do that, I am actually going to put this in order so that we do not have any confusion. So I'll just go ahead and provide this here. So this is going to be our WebSocket object, and this will be our form, and then we shall create we shall basically go ahead and create our messages div or our messages container. It has called it messages div. So once I get this, we can now append each new message we get from here. We can go ahead and append it to our document using the messages div. So to append the message via the messages div, we can just do messages div.append child, and that will take in our new message. and that will update our UI. So if I save, I can actually also go ahead and simply do some trick of helping to distinguish in between the messages, or trying to do something like an HR or a line separator of the messages. So what I can do is to do const HR is going to be equal to document.create element HR, and then I can go ahead and append an HR to our messages div. So once this is done, let's go ahead and try to test this on our two clients we've set up. So if I try to send a message here, I will actually need to first of all refresh, because this is hey, this is actually interesting. Welcome. Wow, this is working. This is actually working. So we are having client this welcome, but we see that our HTML is somehow jumbled. We cannot be able to make this bold. What I wanted is to make this bold, and let me try to actually see how to do it. So I guess I don't know how to do it, but let me just try to leave it to that. And refresh. So when you connect, we're going to see IP address and then that, which is amazing. This is actually good. So says welcome. So this client is saying welcome, and then when I refresh this client, also going to get the same thing, but then I wonder why we are having this extra message. So let me try to see why that is happening. Message, create a new message. Are we sending any data back to the server that's returning that? I really don't know. I guess what I have to do is to make the form input required so that we don't send it without data. Refresh. Still, I'm actually having the same thing. Says welcome. Oh, I think the server is the one that's saying welcome this. It's actually interesting. So the server is the one that's sending this welcome message, welcome, and then the IP address. So I guess I'll have to change that. Coming right inside this, updating this to client IP. Can actually get rid of this and pin this. So the message is welcome client IP. So I don't know how I can get the server, because the server is the one that's sending this message. A server says welcome, and then you can go ahead and log the messages coming from the other clients. So what I can do is to at least remove this, and then yeah, I guess I'll have to remove that. Refresh, welcome, refresh, welcome. Okay, so that's actually interesting. So now there's one problem that we sent a message from one client. It's only going to happen on one client. It's not going to display on any other clients that's connected to our WebSocket server. That means that even if we sent a message from this side, there is no way for us to broadcast that message to other clients that are actually connected to our WebSocket server. Now that's why I created this list of connected clients, because that's going to be our temporary storage for all the connected clients to our WebSocket server. When you have those clients connected to our WebSocket server, all we're going to do is to go ahead and broadcast our messages to those clients. And the way we do that is by simply looping through our list of connected clients. If I go to our terminal right here, you're going to see that we have two connected clients, and those connected clients, I actually have some weird issues here. Let me try to see them. So our list is going to contain two connected clients, and those connected clients are going to be exchanging that information, but the medium is going to be the WebSocket server. So to implement that, I'll have to go ahead and access them by simply coming right here, and then I'll say for manager in manager, that's actually for client in, so each client is being viewed as a WebSocket object. So I'll just come right here and say for manager in manager dot connected clients. Then inside here, I'll have to go ahead and await manager dot send message. So that will send it to a client. Now this I'll update to a client object because the clients are actually of type WebSocket. So have we got rid of that error? I think so. So that means that we shall be in position to broadcast our messages to the WebSocket server and then broadcast them to all the clients that are connected. So if I say hey, then the other client is also going to be in position to get the message. So to say hey. So if I say, so one thing is I'm now getting the issue that if I say this, I'm getting the IP address of the client that is, so that's the issue I have. The client's IP address is the one that's going to be updated here. So I have to go ahead and understand why that is happening. So let me try to close this and see why I'm getting the client IP of that specific client that is sending the message or receiving the message as the one that's being displayed. Send message. When I send a message, I'm going to receive the client's IP. I don't know if there is a way for me to access the client's IP using JavaScript. I don't know if I can be able to do that. There's any, I don't know how to do that. Let me try to Google around and see. I hope there's an API that can allow me do that without having to use. Okay, so I have window.location.hostname and window.location.port. Is there a way for me to send these in the JSON object I'm sending? I guess I'll have to do so. So here I can access window.location.hostname and then window.location.port. So instead of managing this from the server side, I guess I'll have to send them via the browser. So let me try to see. I come right here, message.receive JSON, send message. What is the message going to contain? The message is going to contain the type and the content. It's not going to contain anything else. So one thing I'm doing badly is to get the message content, and I want to get the message as it is sent from the client containing the IP address of the client. So I guess I have to go ahead and modify this. Instead of getting the WebSocket client is host and the WebSocket client is port, I can actually construct the IP address on the front end so that we have unique messages. So I guess I'll have to go ahead and do that. So now I'll have to remove this, and then I say something like message client IP or something of that sort. So once I have that, I'm now going to go ahead and update my JavaScript to send the client's IP. So the way I'm going to do that is by coming right here, JSON.stringify. So in here, I'll have to provide window. This is actually supposed to be the client IP. Now, this is the beauty of JavaScript. I can write this without providing quotes. And then I'll provide window dot location dot host, and then I want this to be one string, so I can do the JavaScript. I don't know if they call it templating, but I think it's what it's called. So this is going to be $, bracket, $, and then since I want to also provide, oh, this is actually going to be inside, so it's going to be window.location.host, and then shall also access window. I forgot the $, dot location dot port. Yes, I guess that's what it is. So when I go back to my manager, I guess I'll have to get the client IP as well as the content, which I'm providing here. So let me try to make this be a little bit organized. Put that on the next line. And that is how our message will be sent. So let me try to make this work. So if I refresh, welcome. If I refresh, welcome. Okay, so I'll send a message. Oh, haha. I'm now getting the server's IP address. Oh, this is weird. Let me try to put it back the way it was. What may the issue be if I'm getting the, because I want to get the client that sent the message, and that's what I want to show here instead of showing this the same client that's receiving the message. Let me try to think about it. Does anyone have a suggestion? You may leave that in the chat. Is that issue I'm having with sending the IP address. This is supposed to be the IP address of this guy who sent the request, not the other client that's being broadcasted to. So it seems like window.location.what is giving us the, and to get the, so document.location.host, okay, document.location.host name, then port, okay, dot host and then dot port. So let me try that. I may have done what I did here, and then I removed it because it didn't work. Let me try to do that. So this is going to be message client IP. Then I'll leave the client to be the one that decides who sent the message. Message client ID, message content. If I come to my index.html, I can now get, oh, let me try to see what I'm doing here. Data.client, data.message, and console log data. I'm actually forming a message here. So instead of client.window.location.host, I can say window.location. Oh, okay. Let me try to do this. Document.location.host, and then window. I think this will be document.location.host.port. Server restarted. Refresh that. Refresh that. Send a message. Still, it's sending localhost 8000. Why? Something doesn't really seem right. Oh, what I have to concentrate on is actually the message content, instead of trying to write here. So I can just get the message content, and after getting the message content, I can update the manager so that the manager has the, let's see, WebSocket.send JSON. So my message here is going to have the client message, and then it's going to have what I had by default, which was the client IP address. But then that means the only thing I'm getting from the web browser is the content, not the message. So this is the thing I'm having. When I broadcast a message, the client IP address is the one that's going to be shown. Oh, let me try to go back. I think I know where that issue is coming from. So notice, let me try to see here. If I go to my console, which I'm in, welcome this. People are actually recommending public APIs. I do not want the API. I want the IP address without using an API. That's interesting. Ah, that's weird. That's really, really weird. That's really weird. But for now, at least we can get these messages from the clients. What I need to understand is how I can show the person who sent a certain message without having to have the same IP being shown right here. Is the method I'm using for sending the messages the one that is actually causing the problem? I think. Let me try to substitute this with the WebSocket object, with one WebSocket object, and see if that will actually work. Server has restarted. If I refresh the clients, okay, so let me try one more time. Client says hey, but then this client is not getting the message, so I'll try to do the same. That's actually weird. I need to broadcast the message to whatever WebSocket that is connected to the client, but then I'm having an issue. I can't seem to figure out the client is the IP address of the. Oh, this is annoying and frustrating. I think the thing is to get the client his IP, the one who is sending the request. I don't know why it's happening like that. I don't know if it's because I'm sending the request on the same host. Let me actually see. Cannot call receive on a disconnected message. Okay. Disconnected client. Message content. Hey. There's a lot of Googling I have to do. JavaScript in the browser is not designed to access the local network information of the client due to privacy and security concerns. Therefore, it's not possible to get a user's local LAN IP via JavaScript without using some form of server-side assistance or third-party plugins. Oh, so it's not possible to get the client IP. So what I can do is to try to use these, but I didn't want to actually use them. Let me try to see how this works. So this is a public API. I'm now going to use the fetch API to get the data of the client's IP. So let me try to do it inside here. So this JavaScript code is going to access this API, get the client's IP address, and then log the data.ip. So let me try to actually refresh, make a request, but then that will limit our application to running only when the user has internet. If you want to get their IP, so I want to go in the console and check if the IP or the client IP has been got. Okay, your public IP is this. This is actually more interesting. I guess I'll have to use this then. So I have to figure out a way to use this instead of using the WebSocket client IP. So to do that, I have to figure out a way to convert this into some sort of like await expression or something I can get the value of the message from. So I guess I have to come right here and say const IP, or I can actually just say, or I can simply create I don't know if I can create an async function in here. I guess I can do that. I'm not a JavaScript guy, but I'll try to do it in here. But then that's not what I actually even want to do. I guess I'll have to let me try to actually get the client IP using this, but then using a way that's going to not limit me to be in the scope of this fetch. So I guess I have to do that with const. This is going to be, let me just call it response, and the response is going to be await. So I have to go ahead and update. I have to go ahead and create a function that's going to be having, oh, that's a mess. So writing JavaScript is actually difficult. It's not something that I'm really so familiar with, but I'll say const, and here we shall have get IP, and get IP is going to be an async function. So I'll just go ahead and provide this, and in here is where I'll try to get the data. So tab9 has saved me. Const response is going to be that, and then we shall get the data.ip. So what I want to do is to go ahead and return this data. So what I'll do is to say that const, or I'll just go ahead and return the data.the IP address. And once I've returned the data.the IP address, now the next thing is going to be for me to go ahead and call the get IP address function in my event handler. I don't know if the event handler can also be async, but let me try. If I say async event, and then what I want to do is to go ahead and get the client's IP. Okay, so let me try that. Client IP is going to be equal to await get IP, because that's the name of the function. So let's try to see what this is going to give us. If I refresh, I'm going to try to send a message. Now it seems like some part of our function is not being called. I think I need help, or I'll have to get rid of the IP address thing. But for now, we can see that there is bidirectional transfer of messages between clients and the server. It's just that I'm getting this weird error that's keeping track of the IP address of the client, and I need to get rid of that. So let me try to get rid of that. If I refresh, what I want is to have the IP address. This says this, this says this, but I'm kind of confused about how to do that. If anyone can help, please do that. I think I'll have to first investigate the message I'm sending. The broadcasting seems to work, but then the message that I'm sending seems to be okay. I go this side. So when I send a message, the IP address is going to be that of the currently connected client that I'm trying to send the message to. I want to figure out a way of getting the client. Is there a way for me to set the client when sending the message instead of having to? Oh, yes. I know why that is happening. So this is taking in a WebSocket object. And that WebSocket object represents the client I'm trying to send the message to. I guess I'll stop formulating the message when I'm sending. I'll just have to keep it to sending the message without having to form it as the client is IP. I guess that is going to be the solution. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then I'll just send the message the way it should be sent instead of having to formulate it from the server side. So that means I get the message and then I send it. I get the message and then I send it. I get the message as I've got it, then I send it. So then if I get the message here, this is frustrating, boring when you get errors like this. Okay, content, hey. So these are going to be undefined. Now I need to figure out how to get the IP of that client who is sending the message, not the IP of the client I'm sending the message to. But if I said something like receive the message, or in my manager, kind of come back with the IP address, but then instead of using the manager to send the message, which I'm actually doing, I don't know, I'll have to this is actually weird and frustrating, but then I guess it's something that I'll have to figure out. If you have some JavaScript expertise, kindly help, because I'm a bit stuck. And yeah, I think the logic of broadcasting, let me try to actually search for how to broadcast instead of using a for loop, because I think that's what is leading to the problem. Broadcast message to list of WebSocket objects. Let me try to see how they implement it in other places and see. So this is actually a FastAPI app. Oh, okay. This is interesting. Add the connection to a connection dict. So connections are a dictionary. And then connect WebSocket.accept access token that. So these people have some kind of like authentication in the connection. Okay. So I guess I have to just do that looping. But then it hurts that the WebSocket is still keeping track of the client IP, which is the default, which is the client's IP. So I guess I have to just leave it to sending messages, which is kind of weird because I want to at least implement this with the functionality of having to see who sent the message. I guess this is disconnected from the server. So when I send this, this is disconnected still. And now we can also get to use this. So it seems like the broadcasting thing is not going to work the way I want it. I can send messages to all the clients that are going to be connected, but then I can't keep track of the ID or the client IP of that specific browser window that actually sent that specific request. I don't know if there's a unique identifier for every browser window that, let me try to see. Because I wanted that to be like a sort of a unique identifier for every client that's going to be connected to the application. Okay, let me see here. Users of many web applications may have more than one browser window open, pointed to the same page. I would like a state of certain things in the page to be retained across both backs. I can either store it in a cookie or on my server. Either way, I can think of how I can distinguish each window. For example, say user Bob has two browser windows open to the list of something page, blah blah blah. You could set your own window name. The exact syntax escapes me right now, but choose the current time and the session ID to create a unique ID on each window. Wow, that is actually weird. Now, this is the problem. I'm not so much of a JavaScript person, so these things kind of tend to be hard for me sometimes. But then, okay, let's just generate a random number for the clients. So how can I do that? I'm going to generate a random number for random number in JavaScript. And that's what I'll use as a unique identifier for every client that's going to connect. So let me see. Random number between 1 and 10 inclusive. I want a random number between weird random. I can actually even just come up with just a random combination of strings and something. Generate random string. I want them to be like the unique identifiers for the, I don't, those don't have to be random strings. I think they should be, I think they should be like the browser identifier. Let me try to see how I can do that. Mr. Little Joel, how are you? It's Saturday. What are you doing? I want a 5-character string composed of characters picked randomly from the set that the problem is I don't know what this JavaScript does, but let me try to understand what it does, because then it's impossible for me to get a client's IP addresses, or else I'll end up doing what I was doing here. I want a unique identifier for every browser window so that when I send a message from this browser, I can get it from the other browser or the other client, but with a different unique identifier, something of that sort. It's pretty frustrating. Want a 5-character long string composed of characters picked randomly from that. What's the best way to do this with JavaScript? Anyway, let me just try to do that and see. So I've just stolen code from Stack Overflow. I hope things do not mess up. This is actually written using function, the old syntax. I want to update this to be an arrow function. So what I'm going to do is to say const make id is going to be equal to an arrow function, and this arrow function is going to be that, which shall then run the rest of this code. Now I need to go ahead and just simply set the client's identifier, because everything has failed. Now I just need to be hacky. So I'll say client identifier, and I guess this will be set every time we are to refresh the browser. So I'm going to say that the client identifier is going to be make id, and let's make this be a 6-digit string. Once we call this a 6-digit string, I'm going to update this function that sends the message so that we have the client's identifier. We can even make things more interesting by adding the timestamp. Oh, good. So once that is done, if the JavaScript betrays me, I'm dead. So I guess I'll have to even update this. So the way I'm going to do that is by coming right here, and instead of using the client's IP, which of course I'm not going to be successful in using with the WebSockets, I will just say message, and then I'll provide the, what did I call it? I called it the client. Yeah. All right. Server is restarting. Let's try to see how this goes. If I refresh, connection is successful. I'm getting that. But then the server is no longer sending connection. Is no longer sending that welcome message. This is interesting. Am I having? Yes, I am having an error. So cannot access make ID before initialization. Now I thought I could at least skip that, but then JavaScript is telling me you cannot do that. You have to follow rules. I have to define this before I actually get to use it. Client identifier. This has to be below the function make ID. Works like Python. Save. Now I know a lot of people who know how to code in JavaScript are going to laugh at me because, oh, welcome. Refresh, welcome. Good. If I try to say, hey, I'm still getting the same. Yes, I think I've achieved what I actually wanted to achieve. I think I've achieved it. I have a unique identifier, and that unique identifier is representing an object. So I can say something like, hi, from this side, and I can get that. Wow. So the thing was about setting a unique identifier from the side of JavaScript and then sending that in the message so that we don't have to use the client's IP address, because the WebSockets are going to be identifying the client, that specific client that sent the message, and that is what was happening. So I have implemented this little chat. I want to go ahead and do something like, let's say, selecting the IP address or replacing this text with the unique identifier of the client so that we know who actually joined. So what I can do is to go ahead and I can actually make this more interesting. I can play around with JavaScript. I can do something like timestamp, which is a new date. And then in my manager, I don't know how I'll get this. Will I get it as a datetime object? I really do not know, but let me try my best and see. I'm getting a timestamp. Is this a timestamp or a datetime object? It seems to be like a string. Let me try to see this. That is actually a string. If I come and say from datetime, I'm going to go ahead and import datetime. And once I've imported datetime, now I want to go ahead and see how I can read this date. So I can do something like print datetime dot str ptime. So print the value to str ptime. What am I doing? So datetime.str ptime, and then here I want to get the message timestamp. Okay, so as server has restarted means I have to refresh the browser, and once I've refreshed the browser, I'll send a simple message. Seems like I have an error still. Datetime has no strp time. strp time, or let me try to p time, and then I get message timestamp. Is it strp time, strf time? I forget those methods a lot. I'm tired. Let me try to refresh and refresh and refresh, and then I get to send some dummy message. Text to argument 1 was given. So I guess I'm confused about something. It returns a new datetime passed from a string, and it takes in the date string and then the format, which is a string. So let me try to see. There are two methods, strp time and this strf time. strf time format using strftime. So okay, so both of them taking the datetime object. I'm really confused about this. If I set datetime and then I put the timestamp, am I having the same issue? String object cannot be interpreted as an integer, so that is a problem. So what I can do is to, let me try to actually use Google, because these are things I do not memorize at all. Read why am I even like why am I even panicking? strftime. Okay, that is if it's a datetime object. What I want is to get anyway. What I'm going to do is to just leave it to this, and I'll send the timestamp exactly how it's being sent from the JavaScript. So I'll do something like timestamp, and then I'll provide the message, and then I'll provide the timestamp. Okay, so once I've provided the timestamp, I'll get rid of this. I won't play with the Python. I want to display the timestamp in my message. Something like at and then the time. I don't know. Let me try to do that with data.timestamp. Okay, refresh. Come back here. Okay, so I'll go back here, refresh. Okay, so send. All right, you're getting the timestamp, but this looks ugly. This looks really ugly. I don't know if there's a JavaScript way of handling that. Can format it in a very good way. So if I say date dot, should I say get time? I think that would be better. If I say that, I have to refresh for the JavaScript to work. At undefined. Oh, this is frustrating. We can get the time. So now we can uniquely identify the client, and I want to also do one thing. So what I'm going to do is to change this, or I'm actually just going to go ahead and add some code, or maybe create sort of like a paragraph called client. So and then this client is going to have a span. So this span is going to have the ID of the client ID. And then that's what I'll auto update with JavaScript to contain the unique identifier. So I can even make this bold. Then I have that. So let's try to see how we can update that. So to update that with JavaScript, I can simply come in here and say const client ID span, which is that. And then the moment I load the window, I want to go ahead and upload and make it have the ID, the unique ID. So I'll just come and say that client ID span dot inner text is going to be the client identifier, which is that. So if I refresh, I'll have the client this, and then when I refresh, I have the client that, and then I think I have to get rid of the whole timestamp thing. I have to get rid of it because it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I refresh and refresh, and then we'll just have to send message hey, and then we can see that this client is the one that sent this message. If I say hi, this client is the one that's going to say hi, and that message is going to show in all the clients that are currently connected to this. So this is some simple chat application, but you can go as far as implementing things like canvases, where you have each client having its canvas, and then you can do things like drawing and showing patterns on both of the canvases. You can do quite a lot of things with WebSockets, and this video was intended to helping you understand how we can implement that. First, it begins with the web server, which is our app.py. We just need to create a WebSocket endpoint and accept a connection. So all that has been done inside the manager class that I've created right here. So this manager class is the one that's handling what happens when we connect, what happens when we disconnect, and what happens when we send a message. I'm going to clean this a little bit, and then I will try to test it, and after testing it we shall end the video. So I'm going to remove all the print statements I've been putting for debugging, and then I'll just have plain code. So I'll do the same thing for the client. And inside our client, wherever I have console log, I'll have to go ahead and get rid of that. Console. I actually need these console.log error, console.log connection closed, and then let me try to see 1, 2. Guess I'll have to get rid of this. And yeah, that's actually done. So what I can actually do is to send a message saying hello to all the other connected clients when a new client joins the conversation. And the way we can do that is by just basically coming right here, connected to WebSocket server, and then we can simply do ws.send. Then so here what I can do is to say client. I can do it in the same way we've been doing here. So I can get the content, the client, and the timestamp. So I'll just come right here and then put that here. So the message is going to be my message in this case. My message in this case is going to simply be this joined, the client joined. So just come and do something like client joined, the client identifier plus the client identifier, and then joined. Okay, so I guess that's what we are going to have. So yeah, so if I send or refresh, client joined, I refresh, client joined. So this one will also be able to know that this one joined. If I happen to open up a new browser, so I'm going to go in incognito, shall see that that client is also going to be joined. If I try to send a message, that message is going to be sent to all the clients that are going to be connected to the WebSocket server. So let's try to chat with all the clients. So right here, I can do something like, hey, that message is going to be sent to all the clients. If I try to send from here, we're going to see that this client is the one that's going to be sending the message, or is the one that's going to have all the others update with the message. And then you can simply run that. So for now, we see that our simple kind of web chat is working, and we've implemented all this using FastAPI on the server side as well as WebSockets on the client side. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Do not forget to subscribe if you're new. I think it's getting a little bit late and I have to sign out. Thank you guys for keeping with me throughout this live stream. It has been a little bit challenging as it wasn't scripted at all, but I hope you've got an idea about how WebSockets work and how we can implement WebSockets using Python, FastAPI, and JavaScript. If you want to support my content, please buy me a coffee down in the link in the description. Also, join the channel. With it comes packs like getting some videos before others get them. And that's what I can provide for now. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a lovely evening, a lovely afternoon, or a lovely day, wherever you are watching this from. I hope to see you in the next video, guys. Peace.